Hi, it's Chris here and welcome to lesson 2. In the last lesson, I walked you through an overview of your learning journey, and that includes learning to use Xcode, learning how to read and write Swift code, which is used for the app logic, learning how to read and write Swift UI code, which is used to describe the screens and the views that the user sees. In this lesson, we're going to focus on setting up and going through Xcode, and by the end of this lesson, you're going to have a working knowledge of using Xcode to start building views. Now, I'll start by saying that Xcode is the same tool that professional iOS developers use day in and day out to build apps. That doesn't mean that this piece of software is complicated. It just means that it has a lot of features and bells and whistles, but I'm going to break it down for you, make sure that you only have what you need at this point to start working with it. So don't be overwhelmed. We're going to go through it together. And if you missed lesson 1, you can view it right over here. Otherwise, let's get started. Okay, step 1 is to download and install Xcode. So on your Mac, hit Command and Spacebar and launch the App Store. Now, if you don't have a Mac, don't worry, there are options for you, and we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But first, launch the App Store. In the corner, search for Xcode, and you should come across this listing right here. This is going to be the official tool from Apple. As you can see, it's number 1 in developer tools. Do note the size. You're going to need actually more hard drive space than this because there's going to be additional developer components that need to be downloaded after the fact. So make sure you have at least 20 gigs or more, I would say. And do not be alarmed by the ratings here. As I've said, developers are forced to use this, and some of them have a love-hate relationship with Apple. I myself really don't mind Xcode. I think it's quite pleasant. Now, if you don't have a Mac, what do? Well, you can use a service called RentAMac.io. And this allows you to remote desktop from your PC into the Mac to use Xcode and the iOS simulator, which we'll talk about in this video. But as you can see here, you can develop iOS apps like this. And these Macs were built for development. Now, in terms of pricing, it can get down to as low as a couple of dollars a day. And as you can see, these are pretty up-to-date Macs and you can get immediate access. Because there aren't very many services like that out there for PC users, I negotiated a discount with them, especially for you and other CodeWithChris viewers. So you can check out in the description below, there's a link to RentAMac.io. And you will get a discount on your plan, and I will get a referral bonus as well at no extra cost to you. So thank you if you use that. Now, I will say that this service isn't for everybody. If you are planning to do this long term, then investing in a refurbished Mac or a used Mac, I would say no more than 2 years old would be a good place to be in, and that Mac will last you another 4 years or so. But if you are unsure of iOS development, you're not sure if this is for you, if you can get a handle on it, that's perfectly normal. This is a good way to get your feet wet and try it out if you don't have access to a Mac right now. All right, so now that we all have access to Xcode, let's dive in and start our first Xcode project. So launching Xcode for the first time, you might get a dialog that pops up asking you to install additional components, like which platforms you want. By default, Mac will be selected, and you can also select iOS, right? And go ahead and install those developer components. After all of that is done, you're going to be presented with a new project screen that looks like this. So we are going to start by creating a new project by hitting this, or you can go up to File, you can go up to New, and you can choose Project. Same thing. It will present to you a dialog. As we said, Xcode can be used to develop for all different platforms on the Apple ecosystem. We are going to choose iOS and we're going to choose App. Then go ahead and click Next. And I'm going to make this very simple for you. For the project name, just type in test because we're just exploring here. Team, you don't have to choose anything. The organization identifier is going to be com dot whatever your name is or company name is. And together with the product name, that's going to be a specific ID for your app. As for interface, it should be set to Swift UI. Make sure it is not on Storyboard. That's the older way of doing things. Language is set to Swift, and testing system and storage, both none. Let's go ahead and hit next. This is where you're going to save it. I'm just going to save it on my desktop, and make sure this is unchecked. We don't need to worry about this for now. Let's go ahead and hit create, and then you're going to have a brand new Xcode project, your first one. Now it's going to look overwhelming because there's going to be a lot of panels and there's going to be a lot of buttons. Let me just expand this a little larger so that we can see what's going on. You can also, there's a divider here. You can adjust it like that. And then we're going to go through the different sections of Xcode now. So there used to be 5 main sections of Xcode, but now there are 6. And we'll get to that 6th one in just a second. Let's start all the way on the left with the Navigator area. Now this is navigating currently your files in your project. There are different tabs. These are different navigators for navigating through different things, whether they be issues in your project or maybe search terms that you're looking for or anything like that. Most of the time, you'll probably be in this first navigator, which is the project navigator, going through the different files in your project. You'll also notice that as I tap on these different files, that this main area changes. This main area is called the editor area, and it changes depending on what file you're trying to edit. Makes sense, right? If I'm looking at a code file that has a view, it's going to be split into code, as well as a canvas where you can see a preview of what that view will look like. If it is just a code file that doesn't show any view, then you're not going to see the canvas. And you can also customize how this looks. We won't dive into that right now. If I look at this, this is for adding images into the project, so it's going to look a little different as well. Don't worry, we'll walk through all of these different file types and how you use them. But for now, this middle area is the editor area. On the right-hand side, we have the utility area, and this contains information, sometimes configuration as well, about the different files. It can also give information about different pieces of code. For example, this utility is a quick help, where depending on where you are highlighting and putting your mouse, it's going to give you information about that code. So that's the utility area. Across the top, this is the toolbar, and this is going to be really important. Right here, you're going to see stop and run. This is to stop and run your project respectively. Hitting run is going to launch the iOS simulator, which is something we'll talk about later in this video. It's a virtual iPhone that sits on your screen so that you can test your app even if you don't have an actual iPhone or device. Also, across the top here, you can choose what version of the simulator you want to use. So maybe you want to test it on an iPad, you can do that. And then on the toolbar, you'll also see status of what's happening in your project. Here you have a little navigational breadcrumb, and this is very helpful when you are jumping between files in your project. All right, we're almost done with the sections of Xcode. There's a hidden one down here that you can uncover by hitting that button right here. This area is hidden by default because this is very useful as you are building your project. It's going to show output from your code. It's going to show errors and different things like that. Here, this is the debug or console area. We're going to be using this area when we start coding. For now, let's keep it hidden. And there is one new 6th area of Xcode that is the coding assistant. So if you tap on this, it takes away the navigator, it turns into a coding assistant, and we'll set this up in just a second. However, I want to say one last thing about the different areas of Xcode, because you can hide and show the various areas. So if I tap on this button, it's going to hide or show the navigators. If I tap on this button, it's going to hide or show the utility area. Furthermore, this button allows me to customize the editor a little bit, but let's not dive into that just yet. You can also go into the view menu and you can show or hide different areas of Xcode. So the navigators here, you can do that, show it again. The inspectors inside the utility area. Furthermore, we have the debug area or console, which we talked about, the tray that sits at the bottom. And let's talk about set up the coding assistant now. You can tap on this button to do that. So if you hit setup, I would recommend just sticking with ChatGPT for now and not diving into Claude or anything like that. This will be the simplest to get started with. So go ahead and go through this and turn it on. By default, Xcode 26 will give you free tokens or free credits to use with ChatGPT, which is what makes it really easy to get started with. If you already have an account, you can sign in and use your own limits and things like that, but this is completely sufficient for us. All right, so those are the main areas of Xcode. I know it's a little bit overwhelming because we haven't put it into context. So now I want to take a look at the actual project that's been created for us. Let's start actually using Xcode, and a lot of the pieces will fall into place. Let's start by taking a look at the project that we've created. What is in a new project? Click this button to go back to the file navigator. And I want to take a look at this first node here. This is your Xcode project file, and it contains all of the configuration and properties for the project. If you tap on it, in the editor area, you're going to see all the project configuration. Here you can decide what platforms you want this app to be able to run on. You can choose what version of iOS you want to target as a minimum. You can specify the app name. You can specify the orientations. These are just a couple of the options. There's a lot of different options here. The reason you don't see any of the files is because you can expand and close that. Now I want to actually bring up the actual files on your hard drive when you create the project. So let me go ahead and open that folder. So you'll see that this we called our project test, right? Test.xcodeproj. This is your project file, and it contains all of this configuration. They're not the actual code files in your project, however. Those are stored inside another folder here. Right now you can see how it maps to the file navigator here. This is your Xcode proj file. This is the folder containing actually all of the code and image files for your project. So if I bring back up here, you're going to see test app.swift. These have a .swift extension. There's that content view. It's right here. And assets.xc assets. This is another folder. If you open it up, it actually contains more folders. And the reason it's like this is because this is for your image assets and different color definitions for your app. Inside Xcode, this folder actually doesn't appear as a folder. If you tap into it, the editor area changes into this. The reason why this is not a folder is because it's easier to manage like an image catalog. So as you're going to see in the next lesson, when we add images to our project, we're going to add it right here to our image catalog. You could also specify colors in your app icons here. All of that gets stored inside this folder here, assets.xc assets. So that's a simple explanation of what an Xcode project actually is and how it gets represented inside Xcode. Now let's go ahead and make some code changes. Now let me explain what these two files are. So if you open test app, you'll notice that there's an @main. This specifies the main entry point for your app. It's kind of like the launching point, if you will. Here you can specify different things you want to happen at launch. You're going to be writing code in here if you need to. But also notice that it creates a content view. You don't need to know what it is or how that works right now. I just want you to see the connection between content view here in the app launch point and content view here in this content view.swift file. Then notice that this code file actually opens up the canvas here because there's a view. You notice the keywords view here. Don't dive too deep into it. I just wanted to explain what these different files are. This is actually a screen in your app. So if you just take a step back, right? This is the app launch point, and it creates a screen. Maps to the screen. This is what the user is going to see at this point when they launch your app, right? If you don't see this canvas, this preview here, you can click on this button and you can make sure that the canvas is toggled on. This gives you a preview of what this code generates. We're not going to dive specifically into the code right now because it's going to be for next lesson, but I do want to walk through a little change with you. Again, because we have selected content view on the file navigator, our editor area changes to edit that file. And this is the code inside. I just want you to make a simple change. you see this line of code right here, text, open bracket, quotation mark, hello, comma, world, and then end quotation and end bracket. You can actually change the text here in between the quotation marks. So you can get rid of it. What happens? The text is gone because there is no text, right? So you can say anything you want. Let's just put our name there, and you can see it immediately reflected in the canvas. Now, sometimes it might say canvas is paused, and you're going to have to click a little button to resume the canvas reflecting the code. So you can go ahead and do that. But the canvas is a great way to get a preview of what you're building. You can even interact with the canvas in the case where there are buttons or sliders or something like that. We're not going to dive into that right now because I do want to show you how to test your app inside the iOS simulator, which we mentioned earlier in this video. So up here in the Xcode toolbar, you're going to choose, I would choose iPhone 17 Pro or a different simulator, whatever version of Xcode you're running, just choose one of the iPhone simulators. And then what you're going to do is hit this play icon, which runs your project. So if you had any coding errors, let's say that when you were making this text change, you accidentally erased one of those quotes, well, that's actually going to give you an error and it's not going to run. So make sure that you didn't break anything when you're changing this text. Make sure it's text, open bracket, quote, and then the text, end quote, end bracket. Now, when you hit that run button that I just did, you can see in the status bar right here what it's doing behind the scenes because there's no visual indication right now, right? It's installing the app onto an iPhone 17 Pro simulator. And if it's the first time running the simulator, it's going to take a little while to boot up. So expect this to take a couple of minutes. But after that, every time you hit this run button, it's going to be pretty fast, within 5-6 seconds type of thing. But the first time is going to take a couple of minutes. So I'm just going to fast forward the video a little bit here. And sometimes as well, it doesn't pop it up right on the screen. So if you look in your toolbar, you're going to see the iOS simulator button look like this. Click it and it will actually pop this up so you can see it. See, it's launching the iPhone right now. And then it's going to install our app onto it. I'm getting these pop-ups because it's the first time running this simulator here. Okay, finally, we see our app on the screen. So this is our text change as well. So you can see how it translates to launching an app, right? This is the entry or app launch point. It creates the first view. And if you click into content view, you can see exactly how that view looks right here based on the code that is written right here. And then when you launch that app, you can see it actually reflected like this. So pretty simple to understand, right? In the next lesson, once we learn some Swift UI code that we can use to customize the user interface or the views, you're going to be able to see something different. Okay, so that's your very basic app. And what makes it more complex would be, as you learn more Swift UI code, you're going to be building views and user interfaces that are a lot more complex than this. You are also going to be adding additional views aside from just content view. You're going to be providing ways to navigate from view to view, right? And then as you learn Swift code for the app logic, you are going to be able to add functionality so that when the user interacts with the screen, you can make something happen. Okay, so to get out of this, you can hit the stop button right here, and that is going to stop running the project. You can see up here, finished running test on iPhone 17, and then it's gone right now. Now this simulator is going to stay launched. If you're done with the simulator, you can hit X to close it. However, having this simulator up and running lets you launch your app really quickly the next time you hit this run button. So it's just going to launch it almost instantaneously. Okay, so I do want to talk about the AI panel. So let's stop the project and hit on AI. Now, as a learner, you want to have a more inquisitive approach to using AI in Xcode. If you are a vibe coder, you don't want to learn, you're just going to be using the AI to tell it to do things for you. But you're here in this video series because you want to learn. So I would advise you to, instead of writing prompts to say, do this for me, or build this UI for me, or do this for me, to instead say, I want to accomplish this. How do I go about doing that? What are the best ways to do that? What are my options to do that? And that can apply to code. That can also apply to just Xcode in general. So for example, this video, we're talking about learning how to use Xcode, right? Let's say you forget about how to hide the inspector panel. How do I hide the utility? Or let's use the terminology that they use. So you're asking questions about Xcode, right? So you get instructions about that. Don't worry about memorizing everything that we talked about in this lesson, because you can have ChatGPT here as an assistant for anything that you might forget. So you might also ask, remind me what test app file is. We talked about how that's the app entry point, but this can remind you of that in case you forget. Having this panel is an amazing tool for anyone who's learning Xcode and iOS app development. And it's better than using ChatGPT or Claude in the web browser because it's contextual to Xcode. For example, if I'm just writing these prompts inside ChatGPT in a browser, it's not going to know what I'm talking about. But in the context of this project, it's just like having someone beside you, your instructor or me, right? You're asking me a question and I'm just telling you and I'm pointing it out to you right then and there. So use it. Use it as a learning tool, right? As we go along in the series, I'll give you more examples of what you can do with the panel. But for now, I want you to treat this panel as if I'm sitting there and you can ask me anything you want as we're going through these lessons. All right, so now you have a working, practical knowledge of Xcode and you're ready to go to the next step, which is actually writing Swift UI code. And don't be intimidated. I'm going to walk you through it step by step. It's going to be very simple. I will say a couple of things at this point. Number one, if you don't feel familiar yet with Xcode, it still feels very foreign. That's completely normal. All it takes is a little bit more time. And I'm here with you every step of the way through these lessons. You will get used to using it, especially just the core pieces, right? And for now, that's all you're going to need. If you feel like you need some additional help or you want some personalized support, do check out our CodeWithC Plus program, which includes access to a community where you can stay motivated, you can connect with other like-minded learners, but more than that, you can get support from the team and I. It also includes live training workshops, and it also includes hours of courses that you can take at your own pace. We're launching access to this new community on October 27th. So if you're interested, check out the link over there, enter your email, and I give you a heads up when it's available. All right, with that said, I'll see you in the next lesson.